So this series. Well, hello everyone and welcome. This is Jennifer Douglas. I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies and Research at APUS. And I'm happy to be here today to introduce this webinar. This is part of our Graduate Studies webinar series. So this series is intended to provide both some academic and professional skill sets for our graduate students. We record these sessions, so if you're a faculty member or a director and you'd like to use any of these sessions or direct students to them, once we have the recording at the end of the session, we post it in the APUS library in the Graduate Studies Resource Center. So that's a place where you can go and look for past recorded webinars, and it's a good resource for students to know about as well, because there's a lot of information there that pertains to being successful as a graduate student. So I'm very happy today to have two presenters with me, Dr. Christi Bartman and Dr. James Hess, who will be speaking with us about helping to prepare for conference presentations, which is something that's a great topic for both faculty and students, and something that we're really looking to encourage both our faculty and students to do, to provide more scholarly activity and to get our name and our research out there into the academic world at different conferences. And so with that, I'm going to turn over the floor to Dr. Bartman.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Okay, so today we're going to talk about preparing for conference presentations, and we're going to cover three aspects of that. First, posters, then papers, then panels. And I'm going to initially cover posters because that is one of my favorites. It's one that is really becoming popular. It started in the hard sciences and now it's moving into the social sciences. So my program at least is getting a lot more exposure that way. And it's a great deal of fun. And how I'm going to do it is just to introduce you to a conference that in which I presented last year, poster competition, was the Franklin Learning Showcase. And not only did I get to present, I also got to judge. Not the same category, of course. But so I'll go through and show you some examples, and we'll talk through it. But first, I wanted to echo something that Jenny said and encourage your participation in conferences, whether it's posters, papers, panels, whichever way you do it. And one way to find those conferences is to join your your national agencies. So like for me, it's the American Society for Public Administration, or NASPA, or the political science organizations, or the law organizations. There are a lot of national organizations out there that host annual conferences that are always putting out calls for papers for those annual conferences. And then there are also regional offshoots of those, which are other great ways to participate in conferences. And if money is an issue, this particular one, the Franklin Learning Showcase, was local for me. So basically, I just had to pay for conference registration. And so it was very easy. I just want to encourage you, particularly as a student, to join these professional organizations because A, your membership is cheaper than it will ever be. You still get the same benefits. And B, you usually get a cut rate on conferences, and either a cut rate or a possibility of grant funding. So keep that in mind while we're talking about these presentations. So let's go ahead and look at poster presentations. Initially, poster presentations usually come in a larger call. This particular one at Franklin University was only a poster competition, but many times you'll see them associated with a larger conference. So you'll see a call for papers, panels, and posters. And the posters sometimes are limited to students. So just pay particular attention to what they're looking for there. And again, for this one particular, I'm not going to read you everything. And sometimes the reason I put a lot of these words in here, these descriptions, is so later when you go back to that recording or when I go back to pull something into the classroom, it's there, because a lot of the times with little bullets, I don't get all the details I want to bring back to my students. So I put these in here just as examples. We're not going to read every word. But look at this one particularly, and I want to highlight it's calling for an abstract in innovation, research, programming, and evaluation in multiple industries. And this particular one combines government, nonprofit, education, and corporate. So pay attention to what they're looking for. And again, in this particular one, they're looking at diverse and exclusive populations and celebration of global diversity and discovery and excellence. improving communities, cultural, educational development achievements, and creating an open dialogue. And you can see it's open for students and faculty. So that's the first key to when you're looking at a conference presentation or a poster presentation or any panel. Look at what they are looking for specifically. And they will go into further detail on your submission. So they're looking for research at all levels here. They give you a very definite deadline, which you have to meet. There are no general exceptions, although if you'll see, this one happens to have been extended. The abstract, they'll give you a word count. This one calls for 200 words. Do not give them much less. Do not give them any more. That's what they're looking for in an abstract, and that's what they're asking for. And then they tell you more detail. And for instance, here, that link would lead you to templates, abstracts, posters from the previous year. It gives you a great deal of information that's very important. Now, if you're looking at an abstract, this just happened to be my abstract. I just threw it up there again. We're not going to go into the detail, but I just want to point out the last sentence. It says, how might we challenge our students to come up with innovative solutions to these problems of ancient origin? If you remember one of the things, some of the things that they were asking for, that they wanted to showcase at the conference, it had innovative thought as part of it. And so that is one of the things I was trying to key in on this abstract, because the closer you can get to what they're asking for, the better your chances of acceptance. And then once you get accepted, and don't worry, if you don't get accepted, it's okay. A lot of the time, these are very competitive. The poster competition usually has a certain number of spots, and so that tends to limit that. Papers and panels, depending on the level of conference at which you're presenting or to which you apply, don't feel bad if you get rejected. It's okay. Just keep trying, or go to a smaller, more local regional conference and start there and work your way up. But the key is to try. So once you get an acceptance for a poster here, they give you the information, and this one, luckily for this conference, it was a really great deal. They had a sponsor. So your poster, all you had to do was give them a PowerPoint, JPEG, or PNG file, and they would print your poster on foam board, 30 by 40, and they would put it up for you. And all you had to do was walk in the room, and it was there. Rarely is it that easy and that nice and that smooth, but this time it really, really was. And so when you're thinking about that, think about putting your poster together. They give you a size. The idea behind a poster is you're just going to walk in front of it 3 to 6 feet out and have them and be able to read it and get an idea of what it's about, and then be able to ask questions. And so you want it to be very clear and very concise, and they'll give you more details on that. And Kelly brings up another point in the chat. If they don't print them for you, then you can print them at FedEx or somewhere like that. A lot of people, I've seen people try to get poster board or foam board on a plane. It's not pretty, it's not easy, and sometimes not allowed. Sometimes people print them on fabric that you can roll, and then you put it on a board when you get there. More and more of the conferences for the posters that I see are you're sending them files and they're printing them there. So that's definitely the way to go if you can possibly get it. Now, when you're putting that together, what you need to look for or to key in on is the visual display. It needs to be appealing. If you're looking at your research, your industry program, evaluation, educational innovation, for this one is what they were looking for. You need to key in on those topics. You need to prepare for interaction with the audience during your allotted session time. And you need to utilize the templates provided if they provide you templates. And like I said, in this case, they provided, I don't know, probably 10 different examples, and you figured out which one worked best. Some of them were highly scientific examples that were nothing but very small font, which would make you crazy. Others were, almost like a poster you'd put on a wall that didn't have enough academic information. And sometimes I've built in posters to a number of my assignments in classes, and sometimes students think, well, yeah, it's a poster, just like a poster on a wall, but an academic poster is very much more detailed. as far as what's entailed. And some of the things that you need to pay attention to on those, you need to tell your readers why your work matters, what you did, what you found, and what you recommend. Your overall appearance needs to be neat and uncluttered. Very, very important. It needs to be able, when you're walking past it, you need to be able to get the idea. It needs to be organized. You need to minimize the text minimize the text, meaning not so much text, but pay attention to the text size, which needs to be bigger. And in fact, you can go online and find these little templates that show the size of the font. If you print that out and put it on a wall, you can get 3 feet from it and see if you can read it. I mean, that's actually what I did. It was an easy way to do it. Usually 1 to 2 meters, you want to be able to use it or read it from 1 to 2 meters away, which is 3 to 6 feet. Cautious with color. Sometimes highlighting or light colors don't come across, so pay attention to that. And you definitely want to make sure you include your contact information, because that's the point. You want them to know who you are and to be able to contact you if they have questions. Now, I'm just going to show you a couple of examples. This particular poster, although I spread it out on this, it kind of blurred a little bit, but this is mediating the NAGPRA, the National Graves Act, bringing cultural consideration back to the table. This was done by a law student from OSU, from the Moritz College of Law, in that particular competition. You can see how she used headings and some pictures. Here's the one I did. It was on a grant topic that I had received funding for and had been publishing on and presenting on. That's another thing you can do to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I had a topic that I was working, and so I did this poster competition. I did a couple of panels, and so you can, work your, thank you, Jenny, you can work your topic in a number of different ways to get the most exposure you can out of it and your work. And so, the pictures and the headings and the block and the blocks of text, so those things are things to consider when you're doing your poster. Now, for this particular competition, this is what it looked like. So this was at our brand new library. It had just opened downtown or remodeled. And so these are the posters. There are actually more. So there's a poster on each side of these. And you can see everybody standing in front of their posters and everybody walking around looking at the posters. And I've been to this competition for a number of years now, and it's gotten more and more organized. It's actually a great time. A lot of neat people. And you can see just here, if you haven't been to a poster competition before, haven't done one, you stand in front of your poster. You need to have a short elevator speech kind of memorized about it, because people just walk by, talk for a couple of minutes, and move on, particularly if it's a judge. And so you will be standing in front of your poster. It's Ashley on the left, and I'm on the right. And you can speak to your topic. People will ask you questions, and the more visually appealing it is, the more they're drawn in and the more questions they can ask. Now, obviously, neither Ashley nor I won our categories, so there were better posters there than ours. But the whole point is it's just a great experience and a lot of fun. Don't forget handouts. I had a copy of my poster, which on the bottom had my contact information and your business cards. So, part of the reason you're there is to network, meet people, and explore not only your research but theirs. So enjoy it. Have fun. It is, poster competitions are just enjoyable as far as I'm concerned. And so let me flip over to the judging criteria. I judged another category, a different category, and I just wanted to share with you some of the things that we were looking for as judges. Each category had 3 or 4 judges from the local community, different people in the local community, from both academia and the community itself. And we were given a sheet to score, and it had these categories, 0 to 10 points for each poster, and then it had the name of each person in the poster, and then we basically scored, got back together, and totaled. So if you look at the keys here, they're looking at visual presentation, content, analysis, and significance. And so just to kind of go through those a little bit more detail, for the visual presentation, they were looking for the visual appeal, use of visuals, easily readable, professional, and no errors, no grammatical errors. For the content, they wanted it to represent an innovative research project. So the key, again, is innovation. You saw me try to use that in my abstract. If you had read the poster closely, you'd see that I was trying to use it there. So I tried to key in on what they were looking for, which should always be your goal. Analysis. Now, these are academic posters. They're not, the key is they want your purpose, your message, your results, your outcome. They want to be able to read through and progress clearly to your conclusions and know that they were supported. And you'll also have references. They may be small references. They don't even have to be the same text size as the rest, but it's an academic presentation nonetheless. So make sure you include everything you would in a good, solid academic paper. And finally, it has to be significant. And I see some of my graduate students on here. I definitely see some faculty on here that do this frequently, but I know that my graduate students know, particularly if you have me with a capstone, that we're looking not to do a research paper on what has been done, but to contribute to a knowledge gap, to the community, or to the organizational need. And that is the big key to what we're doing as graduate students and as faculty when we present. So that is, I'm going to conclude and wrap up the poster presentation aspect of this presentation, and then we'll move forward to papers and panels. But does anybody have any comments or questions on the poster competition? I'm going to let Ron finish typing here. No, Ron, and those conference presentations, there are conferences for works in progress, but a lot of the conferences are full papers. They may be a part of a larger work in progress. Posters generally aren't. You generally look for a beginning and an end to the research on the poster. But if you just read the proposal, the request for proposal or request for abstract, they'll tell you exactly what they need in there. But I have seen a number of particularly the regional conferences that are looking for unfinished products so that people can get comments on those. Jenny, it probably took me to do the poster, not counting going out and taking the pictures, just to put it together after I had worked on the topic and knew the topic well. It probably took 3 or 4 hours. It didn't take that long. I did use PowerPoint. I like to use PowerPoint. It lays out well. It lays out well. However, with the templates that they gave you, you already had kind of the blocks and boxes. You just moved them around and put things in different areas and uploaded your pictures either in background or in the small text boxes or picture boxes, so that made it much easier. Word has some really neat ways to go about that too, but a lot of the times they won't accept that. You'd have to save it into something else. Jennifer, I don't work with the MBA program, but you could talk to your program director, and you also can look at this on your own. I mean, look at some of the national organizations, the management organizations, the marketing organizations that they've got out there for business, and see what they're looking for in their own conferences. And at any time you need to reach out to either Dr. Douglas in Graduate Studies or any of us, we'd be glad to help you work through that. But your program director can also do that. I also recommend talking to your professors in your classes because some may well have. Samir, I have not run into that issue as far as the presentation being an actual publication. I'm going to talk in a minute about a publication coming out of a conference presentation, and that's the one that I have seen more that counts, as a publication when it comes out in the proceedings of a conference. Have you run across just a sheer presentation you wouldn't be allowed to republish, I guess? And if anybody else, I know a number of your, Chuck and Kelly and anybody else, if you want to jump in on this, go right ahead. Good, Samira, thanks. That's something to look for then. We definitely, many times you can't, well, number one, academically, you can't repurpose your publications. You can't publish the same thing in 2 or 3 different publications. So anytime you do this, you have to change it up to some degree. That's why doing a poster session and then doing a conference paper presentation kind of is a way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because at least this way, to my knowledge, a poster is not publication. But again, as Kelly notes, that certainly each conference might be different, and definitely each journal is different to their issue, to their requirements. Thanks, Tony. Good differentiation, Kelly. Yeah, please, everybody, just kind of keep an eye on that, because that is very important, and thanks for bringing that up, Samir. I'm going to move forward onto the presentations, or to the paper and panel presentations. I'm going to cover just some generalities, because basically anytime you present a paper, very rarely, unless you're the keynote, you're not going to be the only one presenting a paper. You're going to be part of a panel. And so James is going to jump in on that in a few minutes. But I just want to kind of give you an overview and show you a few examples of calls for papers. Calls for papers can come out almost a year in advance. So keep an eye on that. This is the American Society for Public Administration, and this is their call. And I just wanted to show you, what it looks like. It's just simple, and they give you the information, they give you the deadline, they give you when the event's going to be held. And so you need to read very carefully for what they're looking. It can be a call for papers, it can be a call for proposals, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples. And read carefully, and a call for panels, so read carefully what they're looking for. And in this particular one, they are looking to the insight on the character, quality, and variety of state and local relations today. So anything you submit has to be in that category. And then you'll see further that they give you examples of what they're looking for. And so pay close attention to that, because there's no reason to send in something that's off the mark, because it won't be accepted. You need to stay as close to what they're looking for as possible. And kind of going back to what the discussion we just had, this particular one is going to produce an edited volume based on the theme. And so papers from the symposium will be included after peer review, or may be included after peer review. Now, they're asking for a proposal by August, and you'll see here that they're asking for the draft papers by January the 1st if you're admitted to the conference. Now, note that their proposal in this instance, the last one was 200 words, this one's 500 words. And then if you've ever put on a conference, it is a bear to get the full paper before the conference starts. But in this case, it looks like that's what they're asking for, so they can get it ready for a peer-reviewed journal or proceedings. And so if they give you a deadline, pay attention to the deadline. And also always look, because again, this is another way to knock out a couple of criteria here. Not only would you present at this conference, but you would have a publication coming out of this conference if you're accepted into that volume. So that's if you can get it done, it's definitely a good way to do that. If you're with APUS and you do a conference presentation and you write up, a short paper for it, but it's not published through there, we have ways to help you get that published. We can work either through our publication folks or help you identify a journal. So please, and we have a lot of blogs out there that we like to host folks in, particularly our faculty and students. And it's only 750 to 1,000 words. So if you give a presentation, you already have the information and you want to get something out there, even if it's not in a peer-reviewed journal, let us know, and we will be glad to help you get something published out of it, because certainly you want to do as much with your information as you possibly can. And so again, I just wanted to highlight that a lot of them do have proceedings that are published. Here's one that's coming up. It's our NASPA conference coming up, and I wanted to show you pay particular attention to what they're asking for here. Proposals here should present the idea and describe what they're going for the particular conference. But look at here's what I want to highlight here. Proposals should include presenters from at least 2 different institutions. So right there, you know they are not necessarily looking for individual papers. They say below it that if you submit a slate of less than a full panel, which is generally 4 people, but James might talk a little bit more about that. If you submit a slate that's less than a full panel, they may put you with others. They may not. If you submit a single paper, it is much harder to get into one of these conferences because they would have to pair you with somebody that may or may not have a full panel, and if they've got a full panel, obviously they're not going to need another presenter. So pay attention to what the call looks at. And in this case, for NASPA, they're looking at you to propose full panels. Now, certainly, we would encourage at APUS that you work with faculty, that you work with other students, that you work across with other academic institutions or practical agencies. A lot of these look for practitioners, so that's important too. Here, the caveat, like I talked about earlier, NASPA receives more than 200 excellent proposals, so please understand that selecting panels is difficult and selective, and you may not get on. And they tell you what preference is given to the panels that address what themes. So again, try really hard to focus on exactly what they're looking for. And I won't go into all these, but see, they tell you that they really are looking for a full slate of presenters, and among other things. So those are the kind of things you need to pay full attention to when you're looking at a panel. And I'll just throw this one out real quick. It's an econ symposium, and they're looking specifically for papers. And they are keying in on not only academics, but security practitioners and law enforcement. And so they'll tell you, who they want to see and what they want to see. This one, I just wanted to end this way to talk about the travel grants that they allow for students. Please watch for that. If you're a student, particularly if you're a student member of one of those organizations and they offer a student travel grant, apply for it. The other thing, and you'll see in this slide, is that they offer the best paper and a runner-up award, and these are sometimes cash awards. So hey, always worth trying that. And so what I'm going to do is turn it over to James now. That was kind of an introduction because obviously every panel is going to have papers on it, and so you'll be responsible for writing your own paper. And again, it goes the same guidance going to the guidelines. Pay attention to the guidelines. Have your peers review it. Have your classmates review it. Have your professors review not only the abstract, but the paper as well, and the poster also. Certainly there's a lot of people that are more than willing to help you in this endeavor. And so, James, I'm going to turn it over to you. James is going to address panels more specifically and presentation at panels and interviews after the fact.
Thanks, Christy. Hello, everyone. This is James Hess. I'm going to discuss two topics today, reference presentations, and they're both really kind of sub-functions within the larger conference presentations, but they can be very specific to what you're doing or something that kind of comes up while you're actually at the conference. So the first one is being a member of a panel. So what happens when you're a member of a panel, and I've done this a few times, and typically more often than not, the organizers of the conference like to form the panels. They've already planned that they have a panel coming up, but they don't necessarily have everyone built out into it until they see kind of some of the presentations at the beginning. That's a very common thing. So you'll see the panels kind of form as you go. Now, some conferences already have them established because they already know who they want on them. Like I said, I've been on both, and really they don't work any differently. You might not be as well prepared for the ones that kind of are ad hoc, but that's kind of what I'm focusing on here is when you are part of a panel, the first thing you need to do is make sure you understand the topic of that panel. I mean, that's kind of the key thing is when you agree to it, the topic should be well defined. It shouldn't be very flexible. It shouldn't be something that changes in the middle of the discussion. It should be very defined. And you, as being a panel member, have every right to sit down and discuss what the topic's going to be, and kind of give your own focus within that panel where you contribute. Once you become selected to become a panelist, one thing that I found really key over time, and a lot of these are kind of my lessons learned over doing these for a few years, and one of the key things I noticed is really taking the time to read the bios of your other panelists, because what you want the panel to do is build on each other and develop a conversation, and not something where each person talks about something that's different. So that's kind of where it goes back to the first one. Make sure the topic's well defined, make sure you understand what the panel's doing, and then take the time to understand where your fellow panelists are coming from in regards to the topic that's going to be discussed. Another thing is, don't interrupt the moderator when he or she is guiding the discussion and the topic. I've seen that a lot in panels where someone wants to make an additional point or go through, and it really changes the dynamics of the panel. If a topic has gone on and a specific area of discussion has passed to a new one, don't try to take it back, because there will be a closing session at the end of a panel. So that's kind of where you can go back and tie things together. So if there was a point that you wanted to make that was really important in the topic of discussion, and you didn't have the opportunity to discuss it as the panel was going through, then just wait till the end. You'll be able to bring it back and focus that discussion. And make sure when you're doing the presentation, focus your research to that topic. Don't take your research and say, well, my research is really over here. If it's not related to the topic, then tell them before you even get to the panel. But once you're on the panel, keep it focused on the topic of discussion, and keep that discussion something succinct and relevant to the discussion you're doing. Because when you are trying to develop a panel and build a rapport with each other, when one person keeps taking it in a different direction, the panel gets confused, it breaks down, and the cohesiveness of the discussion starts splintering. And I've seen those panels. Thank goodness I haven't been on one of them, but when you see those panels, it's not hard to sit there and kind of go, what are they even talking about? So make sure you keep it relevant to that discussion and topic at hand. And I think one good way to do that is by incorporating each other's discussions. If the panelist 2 seats down from you makes a good point, reference your research or something related, reference that, bring it in. I mean, that's kind of the concept of the panel, is to really present an overall discussion. Whether everyone agrees or there's disagreement, that doesn't matter. I mean, actually having some disagreement's a good thing. You do want to get different opinions, but reference them. Weigh those pros and cons and bring that discussion to a much higher level of intellectual discourse, instead of it being, well, this is what I research and has nothing to do with anyone else. That's not the intent of the panel. The panel is really to bring forward a topic and discuss it. And even if, again, you disagree, that's good. You want to bring forward, that academic rigor within the panel. And lastly, kind of like the moderator, don't interrupt your fellow panelists. I mean, nothing's more frustrating to someone who's trying to learn from the panel than when it breaks down into, almost an argument like you're watching network cable news or something. I mean, it should be a very respectful discussion, and one where everyone's able to present their research, build on each other, present that intellectual discourse, and at the same time, do it very respectfully, and keep in mind that there are people in the audience who are looking at the panelists as experts, and they're trying to learn from it. If you have any questions on anything, please feel free to type them in as I'm gone. But so the next one will be that I'm going to be discussing is interviews. So something that's very, very common actually when you're at a conference is for some of the conference organizers to ask for an interview. A lot of times they'll do that for marketing purposes, or sometimes it might be because there are actual news agencies as part of the audience. Regardless of the case, interviews can and do happen in conferences. So, you know, there's some things to do to be prepared for them and things to really think through before you, one, agree to it, and then two, conduct the interview. Obviously, agreeing to them is, you know, something you would want to do, I would think, and it would be something that would be, you know, very helpful within your topic of research. And some of these are no surprise, but again, here, just my overall lessons learned from conducting interviews over the various years of doing conferences. And, you know, the first one I always do when I'm asked for an interview is, that's fine, first let me see the questions that you would like to ask. And when they give you the questions, a lot of times they won't even have the questions, they just want to talk to you. So have them take a minute and write down, okay, I'll agree to 3 questions. Write down the 3 questions you want me to answer, or the 3 topics you want to discuss. And it's not a bad thing to change the question. In my last interview, I actually did that. I received a question and I said, well, this is technically incorrect the way you've stated this. So I rewrote the question and gave it back to the reporter and said, this is how the question should be appropriately asked. And he agreed to that, and so I said, then I agree to the question. So it's a discussion, it's an agreement, so make sure you take that time. You know, it only takes a few minutes, but take that time to get the topic/questions down and agree to them together jointly. When you do that, though, make sure that, again, just like on the panel, and just like any other research, only focus on questions that are related to your research. You're an expert in your research. You're not an expert in a different field. Your opinions should not be coming forward when it comes to conducting an interview at a conference. This is where you're presenting your expertise. So avoid those discussions, avoid giving those opinions when the interview might go in that direction. If it does, I've actually seen an excellent interview from a professor at Columbia University where he was asked a question that was politically charged, and he basically said, this is not my field of expertise and I'm not comfortable answering that. I have an opinion, but I'm not here for my opinion. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if it's not a live interview, because then, of course, everything can be edited anyway, and good or bad. But keep it focused on your research. When you get away from your research, that's when the interview can go sour. So try to avoid anything that's just specifically related to the topic of the conference and your research within that topic. But kind of going back to how the interview is conducted, I always ask if it's going to be live, because I don't want a live interview when it comes to a conference. Not because I'm afraid of a live interview, but because, again, you don't want the questions to be changed on you in the middle of the interview. You have the best of intention being there, presenting and conducting the interview. You don't necessarily know that of the person conducting the interview with you. So if it's possible, say, is this live? Ask if it's live. If they say yes, then say, well, I'd prefer it not to be. Unless there's a really good reason it has to be, I'd prefer that it is not a live interview. And every time I've ever stated that, it's always been very well received. And they're always like, absolutely, no problem. Matter of fact, we will let you look at it before we even send it off for incorporation into the news or whatever broadcast it's going to be used for. And the last one, and there is nothing wrong with doing this, stop the interview if the ground rules you established at the beginning aren't being followed. You know, this is something we used to coach soldiers in. We used to, you know, corporations coach their public affairs and other members of organizations to stop an interview. It doesn't mean just walk away and do something, you know, to abruptly stop it. Just turn it into, okay, well, you know, I'm finished at this point. I actually have to go. I have a presentation here in a minute, so I have to go get ready. There's nothing wrong with politely stopping the interview. And really, you should do that if the ground rules you establish aren't followed, or if additional questions pop up that you did not agree to. So that's just kind of, those lessons learned I've experienced at various conferences and conducting panels and interviews. At this point, I'm open to any questions.
James, I wanted to jump in while they're thinking of their questions. I wanted to jump in on your moderator comments. For those that have not presented at conferences yet, the moderator is generally chosen once the panel is put together, and the moderator kind of should orchestrate everything prior to the actual presentation. They should let you know how much time you have, and then they should, so time for presentations for each paper and then time for questions. They should gather the papers of the panelists and exchange them prior to, or any notes or anything that they can. But the moderator is kind of the key. Also, if you have any kind of an AV request, usually when you register, if your paper's been accepted, they'll ask if you have AV requests and you tell them, what you need. But your moderator also kind of pulls all that together. And you should always make sure you arrive for your session a bit early. I have had issues with PowerPoint, and so actually I went from utilizing some live web resources in my presentations to taking screenshots of a website and put it on a PowerPoint just so I was sure that was going to show and I wouldn't have technical difficulties there. Flash drives are really great. Sometimes the moderator will collect them all. So just make sure, and some moderators are not very good, and they don't do those things, but ask. They should, and they should be organizing it. So once you get there, you should know how much time you have, who else is on the panel, as James said, to circulate the bios, and be confident in how things are going to be presented. And yes, you're right, Chuck. Technology fails.
Yeah, thanks, Christi. That's great. And really kind of even going back on Christi's point, the moderator should also tell you if you have concerns for needs of an interpreter, because that's something you must consider when conducting interviews and panels. That if it's an international conference, you will be dealing with interpreters in foreign languages. So you have to kind of develop a rapport with that interpreter for how long do you talk before stopping and letting the interpreter take over. And how they are going to interpret certain technical research points that you might have. I mean, all those are things you have to consider. So if you have the ability, talk to the interpreter ahead of time. I see Daniela has a question reference hecklers, and that's a great question. Actually, I've never had a heckler. But on one of my panels, I did have someone ask a question to challenge the overall research that was being presented. And that's great. That's actually, if it doesn't happen within the panel, that's actually something that's encouraged, if you will, from the participants when you have a panel that has the ability to ask questions. And so in that case, given that it was the field of research that the panel had conducted in great detail, we were able to kind of deliberate and discuss, okay, here's the positives and negatives from the point you're bringing forward based on the research. So that's a great point, and just so you know, Daniela, that's I know Bethany's saying she had a heckler here, but again, I've never experienced a heckler, but you do experience people challenging, and that's not a bad thing because that's, again, the pro and cons of the discussion. I see Samir's question about requesting interview prior to the interview. Yes, absolutely. And that's what I was referring to. As soon as someone asks for an interview, very first thing, if you decide to agree to it, then the very next thing should be, okay, what are your questions/topics? And again, I always limit them to 3. And then we debate the questions and topics if that's what they want. And again, feel free to change them. I did that, and it was very, very well received. And they actually appreciated that I refined the question for them. And Chuck's right, technology will fail, and it does. And to be honest with you, my preference every time I've been a part of a panel is I always ask for no audio-visual, no technology. I always want it to turn into a discussion. And those are the panels I prefer. I've been on the ones with technology, and yes, they do fail. And it's a frustrating thing. It's something you have to expect will happen, but if at all possible, focus more on the ones that don't have them. But either way, certainly don't turn down a panel just because they're using PowerPoint slides or something to that effect.
And always have a plan B. If you're using technology and it fails, you need to know in advance what you're going to do. What's the backup on that? The other thing is I have been to a number of academic conferences where people literally read papers. We're talking 25-page paper. If at all possible, avoid those. Most of what we do here at APUS has more of a practitioner focus or practical application focus, and so when James is talking about getting up there and talking without AV, he means he wants to have a discussion. It's going to be animated. He's going to be talking extemporaneously on things, and he's not going to be sitting there reading a paper. That is probably the most boring conference you can ever go to. So please don't just read what you brought to read. Right,
and that's, and my experience with doing it is when you demonstrate that you are truly the master of your research and you have that mastery down. You understand the details. You can talk them ad nauseum. That's when you've had a very successful panel. When you walk off that panel and you come down and you have 10 people standing there waiting to ask you questions, that to me always tells me that I did something right in that panel and I did something right in that discussion, because that's the kind of conversations that you want to generate. The really, like I said, the intellectually advancing, academically challenging discussions, discourse of how we actually move forward in these fields. I'm not trying to talk about anything specific. I was trying to be general, but I mean, in my last trip to Thailand, that was exactly what I experienced, was coming down and the line of people waiting to talk and ask questions, and it turned into, nightly meetings about what they wanted to discuss. Those are the conferences that are really exciting to be a part of. And like Christi just mentioned, no one's reading slides. They're there to learn, they're there to engage, they're there to bring about, true understanding of an issue and advance that issue. Those are fantastic conferences.
And Ron's right. It is definitely important to not only support your other panelists, but those conferences totally, not only just your panel, but the conference itself is a great way to make professional connections. As well as make sure you take your business cards. Make sure you go through the sponsors area, because you'll have a lot of publishers back there that might be interested in something you're doing, or having you work in on a chapter of a book or something like that. So make sure when you go to these conferences, take advantage of every aspect. Don't just go do your presentation and walk away.
Yeah, exactly. And Chuck, you're absolutely right. Nobody's there to look at the PowerPoint slides. They want to, and if they are, then, whatever. But my experience is they really are there to listen to what you have to say, and that's the focus. And again, just like Christi said, Ron's absolutely right. Support each other on the panel. Again, even if you disagree with them, turn it into a very, professional discussion and a good academic discourse, and that's the key for a successful panel.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? All right. If that's the case, James, thank you so much. Everybody, we really appreciate you signing in. Thanks for being interactive with the panel or with the discussions. We wish you the best of luck on your upcoming conference presentations and paper presentations and poster presentations. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to your professors, to reach out to your program directors, and anyone, your faculty directors, anyone that can help you move forward with that. And again, if you do a presentation at a conference and you want to do a blog article or something after that, just let us know. Check in with your PD, your program director, or your professor, and see if they can help put you in contact with some folks that can get you involved in that. We certainly encourage that, and we love to see interactions between faculty and students, presentations together, research projects together. We want to support you 100%. So for the faculty and students, we really appreciate you being on today, and thanks to everybody for your time.